Promises made, promises kept. Former Interior Secretary Ryan Zinke now with us here on Montana Talks. Mr. Secretary, good to chat with you again. Thanks for being with us.
Great to be with you always.
Well, you seem pretty elated yesterday.
I'm very excited.
Yeah.
Well, I'm excited. A lot of hard work went on this, and I think our park system, America's best idea. An issue over time was they were becoming dated. The trails were not kept up. The campgrounds, reflected camping habits in the 50s and 60s rather than how people camp today with, larger vehicles or RVs. A lot of our trail systems have become atrophied, in some cases closed. So this is a huge step forward. And at the basis of it is how it's funded. Excuse me, how it's funded, which is really important.
Yeah, talk about it from a personal perspective too, because you were there as President Trump's Interior Secretary, and so this isn't just promises made, promises kept from a Trump administration standpoint, not just promises made, promises kept from Senator Steve Daines' standpoint, but from your personal standpoint as Interior Secretary and as a Montana Congressman prior to that. These were things you pledged to make a priority, and you're seeing your work also now come to fruition.
Well, the president is from New York. Unlike Teddy Roosevelt, who came out west and had an experience. And Teddy Roosevelt really was, I think, the beginning of the American conservation ethic, which is best practices, best science, greatest good, longest term. So I talked to the president long and hard about, Mr. President, our park system is really the gem of our public lands. And you have 330 million visitors each year. The infrastructure needs to be addressed. It's a great jobs program, especially for the trade and the craftsmen, the guys that are laying the pavement, the guys that are going to fix the lodges, the trail systems. And this should be a national priority because our parks, the system itself, are wildlife refuges, our Forest Service lands. They're the envy of the world. And I am just so thrilled that this effort went forward. And thank you, bipartisan. This is a red, white, and blue bill. Certainly Steve Daines and I, we've battled and fought for LWCF, and Montanans are a little different. We enjoy the outdoors. We like to hunt. We like to fish. We don't like roads being shut down and our public land, which belongs to the public, to be bubble wrapped and only used by those elitists that can afford 2 weeks or afford an outfitter, et cetera. So this is really what I call a blue collar American public recreation, a recommitment to our public lands to make sure they're available and used in the next generation to come.
Well, and I think the addition of the infrastructure funding to this package, that to me, that's the biggest victory here is because the environmental groups and the Democrats, they've long pressed for full funding of the LWCF for years. But my whole point is, okay, you want to buy more land, but you can't even, and you won't even take care of what we've already got. To me, making sure that infrastructure funding is a part of this is about making sure that we're taking care of what we got and taking care of it so the next generation and the next generations can access this too. I mean, some of my best memories as a kid are driving through Glacier National Park on the Going to the Sun, road, and so but there's some who don't want road access and they want to remove that. So this is key.
Well, it absolutely is. And this is you have the mirrors that want to look at land, and some of the radical environmentalists, even in Montana, would rather have the entire forest burned down than to harvest one tree. And the consequence of having a forest burned down not only is destruction of habitat, it's wasteful, it costs lives. Our firemen are out there in the front lines every season because we have to go stewardship. And this is what the Roosevelt legacy really is about. It's about stewardship. It's about multiple use. And those that disdain fossil fuels and made American energy, I can tell you that environmentally, it is better to produce energy in this country under our regulatory scheme than watch it get produced overseas with no regulation.
Let's go right into the phone calls here. Matt in Billings, what's on your mind this morning?
Good morning to both of you, and I would like to thank Mr. Zinke for representing Montana on the national level in a very respectful manner. I really appreciate that. And fighting for the people out west, Montana, Wyoming. I found a quote by Governor Gordon out of Wyoming very interesting. He said, "Tourism is the new coal," which I believe that is the way that the world has gone with AOC and the Green New Deal, that our tourism out west, Montana, Wyoming, Idaho, Utah, is going to be the new bread and butter for tax revenue.
Well, I think it can be a little bit of, we can have it all, frankly. You know, we can have the oil, gas, and coal development, and then that will put the money in our pockets so that we also get to enjoy our own backyards here. That's kind of my take on it. Yeah,
absolutely. But my original call when I called in was what's really confusing watching the cops being charged in Georgia yesterday was the prosecutor, first of all, made this a political witch hunt, I would say. And second of all, is I want to know where the charges are against Mr. Brooks. For DUI, assaulting an officer, disarming an officer. I mean, where are those charges?
Well, Mr. Secretary, you heard Matt's call there in Billings. Everything from public lands issues to law enforcement. We'll start with law enforcement. I know you've talked about what it was like being a Navy SEAL and rules of engagement where you had your hands tied behind your back. That's one of my big fears, is that our law enforcement's going to be more at risk now.
Certainly, I'm very pro law enforcement. What we don't talk about is how many officers lose their lives in line of duty every year. It's tough. Do I think there's room for change? Absolutely. I think it boils down to respect. I think you have to respect each other as a human being. Follow the laws, but also if there's bad cops out there, and we all watched the horrifying videos. But it was wrong, as shameful, as disgusting, should never happen in America, but it did. So you have to have a dialogue how to make it better, but you don't defund the police department. You don't have these radical ideas like the Green Deal that believes cow flagellation is an issue. And we talk about public land. Well, recreation and tourism somehow is going to lead Montana. That's from someone who's never been in business. In Montana is a diversity of the economy, manufacturing, still timber, still mining, still ag, looking at businesses, high tech. Montana, in order to have an economy that is vibrant, has to have a diversity in our economy. And service industry jobs are pretty tough. They don't pay a lot. The tourist season more or less is in the summer. I think going back to the bill helps fund the recreation aspect of it and the infrastructure that makes it possible to enjoy our public lands. Now, when Sperry burned down, there was a lot of people that didn't want to rebuild Sperry, because what we face is this radical Green Deal people that don't want you on our public land. They don't want you on your land, because public land belongs to everybody. But when you have these people that want to bubble wrap it and prevent you from having access, shutting the trails down, shutting roads down, and I'm getting older, we're all getting older. And I like the fact that there's grandparents out there taking their kids hunting, but you can't do it when roads are shut down. You can't do it when trails are shut down, or even mountain bikes. Let's make sure that you have the new e-bikes coming in there. Let's make sure we have public access for for those people too.
Yeah.
Snowmobilists.
In fact,
Montana loves snowmobiling.
In fact, I was chatting with Carrie White, Representative Carrie White out of Bozeman, and balanceduse.org. They're highlighting right now the Helena Lewis and Clark National Forest Plan that was just released. You know, you got Secretary Perdue, Trump's Secretary of Agriculture, and the president, who said, hey, we want more access. We want more recreational opportunities. But then you got deep state operatives in these land management agencies that are proposing to cut back on access, even for mountain bikers, let alone everybody else.
Well, and if you've ever snowmobiled, tell me when the snow melts, any damage that a snowmobile has.
Yeah.
You know, other than you got some people there that don't respect rules, that you know, go in restricted areas, et cetera. But you know, technology, you can put a chip on, you know, on is when you buy a license out in your public land. There's all sorts of very clever ideas to make sure that you can keep the bikes on the bike trail, and in my experience, mountain bikers, snowmobiles, dealers are very respectful people. But this recreation bill, you know, goes a long ways in making sure that those trail systems, you know, connect and are well maintained. It was amazing in Interior that the Park Service trails don't connect to the Forest Service trails, don't connect to the BLM trails, don't connect to. You know, it's all public land, and it should operate more as a system, you know, based on watersheds to protect, you know, the core and essential elements of a healthy ecosystem. But recreation is so important in Montana, but it's also important to be a steward of it and making sure that when you have public land under jurisdiction of either the Fed or the states, that it's well maintained. And it's taken care of. That means you got to remove the dead and dying timber. That means you got to make sure the trail systems are well maintained. The recreational opportunities are maintained for everybody.
Exactly.
And not just people that want to hike or can afford, you know, a helicopter to go in 7 ranges and be gently set down. That's not Montana. That's Hollywood.
Yeah, and you always hear these environmental groups try to shut things down, and they say, well, our outdoor economy is so important. Well, yes, our outdoor economy is important, but 60% of our outdoor economy is motorized recreation that they try to shut down. Only about a minute or so to go here with former Interior Secretary Ryan Zinke. Then we'll be joined by U.S. Marshal Rod Ostermiller. But Secretary Zinke, you know, the LWCF, okay, big, you know, historic conservation victory. How do we ensure that now that they get this LWCF money, that they actually keep the land open for access instead of just the radical left just shutting things down and closing trails like they always seem to do?
Well, you know, no amendments are added on to it. I'm and myself and Steve Daines have always been supporters of LWCF. You know, so is Senator Chesky. You know, and again, LWCF is not a red or blue; it's a red, white, and blue program. But I think you have to look at it. One is I think it should diversify the revenue. Right now, it's all from oil and gas and all from Gulf and offshore. I think it should. I think everyone should contribute to include renewable resources to make sure the revenue is more diversified as far as the portfolio goes. And when you assume federal jurisdiction over land, I think there should be a maintenance plan and a public access plan that is incorporated, bound in that when you assume stewardship of that parcel or parcels.